Welcome to this new video about Equalizers. Equalizers are a really important tool when it comes to do live mixing. Probably one of the most important tools available in our mixing consoles. So in this video I will explain you what is an equalizer, what do you use it for, and how does it work for live mixing. So there is various different types of EQ. There's two main types of EQs. So the first type of EQs is the parametric EQ. Most of the mixing consoles do use the same type of parametric EQ. So most of the mixing consoles provide like four different frequency bands. So what can you do with these four frequency bands? So maybe let me first quickly explain what actually this graph even is. So the y-axis of this graph is basically the gain of a specific frequency. So it's 0 here. This line here means we neither turn up nor turn down the volume. So if we just leave the line, if we put the line at 0 here, basically it means we don't do anything with the signal, we just let it pass through the EQ without doing anything to it. Then the x-axis here is the frequency. So it starts at 20, here we're at 100 Hertz, here we are at 1k Hertz, 10k and 20k. So what basically this shows now is the whole frequency spectrum and how we change the frequencies over the spectrums. We can either decrease or increase the frequencies, and the parametric EQ provides these four bands, and for each band we can pick one frequency. So here we picked 246 Hertz. We can also see this here, and it was decided to decrease 246 Hertz by 12 dBs. So this frequency was turned down 12 dBs, and then a third parameter each band provides is the bandwidth, basically, which is this one here, and it basically decides, do we also pull down the surrounding frequencies or do we just pull down one single frequency? So that's basically the bandwidth. You just decide like how far the spread of frequencies to either turn up or down is. And we got four of these bands, and for each of these bands we have these three parameters. So the frequency you pick, the bandwidth, and the gain, like whether you turn it, how much you turn it up or down. That's basically what a parametric EQ is all about. Then a graphic EQ is a little bit different. In a graphic EQ, you have 32 bands, so you have 32 frequencies. I mean, there is different graphic EQs, but there's many graphic EQs that have 30, either 31 or 32, I'm not sure anymore, bands. And you can, for each of them, decide to turn up or down the frequency. There's one big downside of it. You cannot pick the frequencies. So the frequencies are fixed. So all the 32 frequencies are fixed from the beginning, and you can choose for these frequencies whether you want to turn them up or down. And there is also no bandwidth, so it's almost always just a fixed bandwidth. So you will pull down the frequency and a few surrounding frequencies, so that's all fixed. But the advantage is you got much more bands, so 32 instead of just 4. So let's talk about why do we actually need a parametric EQ? What is it used for? We will here mainly talk about parametric EQs. We will talk about the graphic EQ in another video in more detail. So the question now is, what is actually the reason we need parametric EQs? What can we achieve with them in our mix? Most people get these points wrong, and most people use the equalizer for things it is not supposed to be used for. So this is why it is really important that we talk about these things, why we actually should use a frequency, or what for what for we should use an equalizer. So first point here is we can use it to get rid of inference frequency. So that means if you get the sound from an instrument, and it is highly likely that several frequencies of the sound you get from the instrument have some are either too strong or not strong enough. This is also depending on the room, how the type of the room, the size of the room. So there might be certain frequencies which just react in the room in a way such that they can be heard louder. So what you can do is with the parametric EQ is look out or search for these frequencies and then turn them down so that you get rid of this noisy, loudy frequencies. That's probably use number one. Use number two is you can also push sweet spots of an instrument. So every instrument is strong in certain frequencies and every instrument is weak in certain other frequencies. So what we can use the parametric EQ for is also to push frequencies in the area, in a frequency range where they are strong. Number three here is remove audio bleed. So remove audio bleed means that's actually especially for microphones this happens a lot. It means that when someone sings into the microphone and the person stands next to the drum, it is highly likely that some of the drum sound will also be picked up by the microphone. And this is what we call audio bleed. So we get signal into the microphone we don't want to have in the microphone. And if there is, like, let's say the kick drum coming into the microphone, we could use the EQ to remove the frequencies of the kick drum for that microphone, because these frequencies are not important anyway for a voice. So we can remove them. We can remove them and in this way compensate for audio bleed. And then number four is compensate frequency spectrums of other instruments. So what does that mean? That's probably the most complicated point of all. And I have to show you this a little bit by doing some drawings. So I draw a little graph here. So we have the frequency spectrum here, 20 Hertz, 100 Hertz, 500 Hertz, 1K, 10K, and 20K. So that's the whole spectrum here. And this is basically the volume at each frequency in the frequency spectrum. So what is our goal when we mix a band? Our goal is that the whole frequency spectrum is basically, or large parts of the frequency spectrum is covered by some instrument. We have to know one thing when it comes to volume and frequencies. When you hear the instrument playing at a certain frequency, let's say 150 Hertz, and another instrument is playing at the exact same frequency as well, also at 150 Hertz, what you will hear in the audience is only one of the two. You will hear only the one which is louder. So you cannot hear two instruments at the exact same frequency. That's not possible, like physically not possible. So we'll always hear just the louder. Of course, there's 20,000 Hertz available. That's why it's actually possible to hear all of the instruments. And of course, also there is not one instrument which just plays at one frequency. Every instrument is distributed over large frequency ranges normally. But still, or despite that, each instrument is strong in certain frequency ranges. So our goal is to basically place the instrument into these frequency ranges so that every instrument is heard at the sweet spot of the instrument. So we can just do a little example on this graph here. So we can use the bass guitar. The bass guitar is very strong at low frequencies from like around 40 to probably 150. So we want to make sure in the equalizer we don't cut or we don't lower the frequencies in this range for the bass, because that's where the bass is strong, that's where we want to hear him. We can lower the bass frequencies in other ranges around the spectrum, but probably not in that range. We can now continue with the drum. So it already now becomes a little complicated, because when we start with the kick drum now, we see that the kick drum covers a similar area as the bass. So what I normally try to do when I do a mix is I try to push the kick drum at a little bit different frequency than the bass. So I normally push the bass around 40 to 60 hertz and the kick drum around 60 hertz, probably around 60 to 80 hertz, so that I can hear both bass and kick drum well. It goes on with the snare. The snare probably starts at 120 something, and it goes up. It goes actually up pretty far because we got the chain too, but just the snare top sound, like the drum head sound, is probably going like from 150 to 300 something, or maybe 500. Put a little bit too much up, like snare. So we should make sure we have a good snare sound in that area. And again here, snare for the chain. We then go on with toms. So toms, they also spread over like 150 to probably 800. I always try to remove around 500 a little bit because of this boxiness, boxy sound we get around these frequencies. That's actually a lot of just experience also needed to know where the instruments are strong and where they are weak. It's a lot of, you just have to do a lot of listening, a lot of mixing to really find out where each instrument is important. And it's also, of course, a bit of a taste. Every sound engineer's taste is a little bit different, so everyone would probably explain this graph a little different. The only goal I have here is to show you how that basically the instruments are spread over the frequency range, and that you should try to arrange the instruments as good as possible over that range so that every instrument can be heard. Let me just quickly put in the acoustic guitar, which is strong in that area. Vocals are strong. Vocals are strong in, I'd say, this area, like 500 to 10K. Piano is strong from here, from like, yeah, I would say, yeah, probably even higher. We get the bass notes, but we also get the higher notes for the piano. So keys range is pretty broad. So we see now it becomes quickly pretty messy. So our goal, and this is also what bullet point number 4 here says, is compensate frequency spectrums for other instruments. So what does that mean? If the instrument is not really important at a certain point in the frequency spectrum, you can try to turn this frequency down a little bit. Don't switch it off completely, but you can try to turn it down a little bit so that the other instrument where it is more important can be heard. Often this is done wrong by sound engineers too. When they think, when they feel like the people cannot hear the instrument well, they just turn it up. But often it's not about turning an instrument up, but rather turning another one down, or turning a certain frequency range of another one down, so that the instrument which cannot be heard sticks out of the mix again. So there's a lot of things you can do wrong with parametric EQs. I picked 4 things here. Number 1, design sound image of the instrument. This is a very important one. Our goal is that the instrument sounds as natural as possible always. So we don't want to change the sound of the instrument. That's never our goal with an EQ. So when you do hard changes on the EQ, the instrument will sound different. And that's definitely not the goal. Also, with all I've talked before, like placing the instrument in the frequency spectrum and so on, You will never change the EQ so hard that it sounds completely off or different. So you just do, this is all just fine adjustments. Get rid of strange effects an instrument has. So if the instrument is broken and sounds strange, many sound engineers start to turn knobs on the EQ to get it right, but that doesn't just work. You should never do that. You should always walk to the stage, talk to the guy on the instrument, and make sure you can fix the issue on the instrument and not on the EQ. Number 3 here is fix wrong or bad sounding instruments. It actually goes along with get rid of strange effects on the instrument. Here it's more like if he uses his instrument wrong, you cannot fix this with the EQ. So it's really, I just want to point out here, basically, it's really important that you always first concentrate on the source of sound. So especially for the drums, make sure the drum is set up properly. Try to use like rings on the snare drum or on toms if there is too much reverb or whatever. So always try to first fix the signal source and then do fine adjustments with the EQ. Also, if you feel the PA, it doesn't provide enough bass or whatever, don't just EQ the bass up, bass frequencies up on the instrument, but try to place the PA in a better way such that the PA is sounding well. That anyway you always have to first do, make sure the PA is set up properly, sounds well, and then start the sound check. So if you in the sound check feel the instrument doesn't sound well with this PA, I just fix it with EQ. That's not a good idea. Always fix first the PA. Okay, so to end this video, let me drop another few facts about EQs, which you should always have in your mind when you do use them, when you do sound checks. So first point here, before enabling the EQ in a sound check, always listen to the voice or the instrument without having the EQ in. So most of the time we use a preset EQ. We already have some settings in the EQ such that we can do the sound check faster. But here I want to encourage you, always first listen to how it sounds without the EQ, so that you know how the instrument sounds naturally, and then enable the EQ and change parameters. Number 1, you should never change the EQ drastically. So that means if you have to change the EQ more than plus or minus 12 dBs, that might be too much. So we just do fine adjustment with EQ and not like change it too much. So yeah, again, check first the source of the signal, check the position of the speakers if you feel you have to adjust the EQ too much. One thing you have to pay attention to here is that when you decide to push a certain frequency, you have to know you increase the gain of that frequency, and that it could potentially overdrive or peak again. So always keep that in mind when you push frequencies, that they not peak. Finally, I've talked about this a lot now already. Just let me give you these 4 bullet points to just summarize the whole thing. What is our goal with EQing? So our goal is to reach this balanced sound image. So that's also what I drew before here. We want to distribute the instruments over the frequency spectrum as good as possible to get this balanced sound image. Our goal should be that every instrument and every voice can be heard in the mix. That's what we want to achieve with EQing. Number 3, instruments have to sound as natural as possible. I also mentioned that already. You don't want to change how an instrument sounds, so always make sure the instrument sounds as natural as possible. And then we want a tight yet clear mix. What does that mean? Often we do have certain frequency ranges which are not important for a certain instrument, and if we would not turn down these frequency ranges, we would get a really muddy mix, which is not clear, which is not clean. So our goal is to remove or turn down all these ranges. also if we feel like this range is important for a different instrument, so rather turn that range down for the current instrument so that the other one can be heard well, so that not too many instruments act in the same frequency spectrum. So that's called a clean mix, a tidied up mix, which doesn't sound, we don't want it to sound messy, we don't want it to just be loud, but we want it to sound nice, clean, so that everything can be heard properly in the mix. Alright, so that's basically sums it up pretty much. So thank you a lot for watching the video about equalizers, and in our next videos we will go into what is a compressor and what is gates. I'm looking forward to see you there.